Hey there and welcome. My name is Pete and today we complete a Pete Complete video. Today is the channel's 5-year anniversary, or rather 5 years ago I posted my first video, and over the course of these 5 years I have received this question again and again: Pete, how exactly do you make one of your videos? And so, to celebrate this special occasion, I thought I'd show you. Now, before we get started, just like every creator, we need a few tools. For the heart of the recording and editing process, there are 4 programs that I use, not counting the game that is being recorded, of course. But speaking of recording the game, let's start there. To record my gameplay footage, I am currently using a licensed version of Bandicam. I know that OBS is used by the vast majority of creators out there, but I never found it to be able to do exactly what I needed, which is why I opted for something else. Until about a year ago, I have actually been using DxTory, but the software is no longer being maintained, and I ran into more and more trouble trying to record newer games, so I eventually made the switch. Regarding my actual recording settings, I am now recording all gameplay footage in 1440p at 60 frames per second using the Magic YUV lossless codec. Yes, I record lossless for that maximum quality, albeit at the cost of absolutely massive file sizes, which are further increased by the switch to 1440p actually, so this would definitely not be practical if I did not have an entire SSD dedicated to only store the raw recordings. Back when I recorded in 1080p, I actually used the Lagarith lossless codec, but once again that is no longer being updated and was more or less unusable for 1440p. So, with those settings, we are now jumping into the game, and let's take RimWorld as an example for this. It is, after all, the channel's most popular series. Now, what I do not do at this point is to just hit the record button, let the game run for an hour, stop the recording and cut everything together. That would inevitably lead to me making a ton of mistakes, and no one wants to see that. So instead, I record in short scenes. I think about what I want to do, sometimes that takes a while, especially in tricky situations like drop pod attacks for example, and I only start to record actual footage when I hit play. That way, I do not produce a ton of footage that will never get used anyway, and editing also becomes a lot easier, because in almost all of the scenes, something is happening that is worth showing in the final video. Also, very importantly, I do not record any actual commentary during all of this. Instead, I focus entirely on what is happening on screen. For a typical RimWorld episode, I then end up with a bunch of these short scenes, usually about an hour to 90 minutes worth of footage, but the entire gameplay session, and that includes me thinking of strategies, making some notes or calculations, or quickly checking something in the RimWorld wiki, that entire session usually lasts for about 3 to 4 hours. So, now we have all that footage in lovely lossless quality. Up next, we have to turn all of that into a video. And for that, we jump into Sony Vegas Pro 13. Once again, I know that there is more up-to-date software out there, but I was very lucky to be able to get this during my days as a student, and it has worked extremely well for me basically since day one, although there is of course a bit of a learning curve. Now, I already have a template here that has the right settings, includes the full intro and the outro music, as well as customized tracks for the in-game audio, the commentary audio and fan art, if we have any. For games that include achievements, there is also another track where those go, but for RimWorld, that is not needed. So, first things first, we are now dropping all of that raw footage in here, and that is basically it for the moment. Now we fire up Audacity to record the actual commentary. Sometimes I also write a script for my voiceover, especially when I don't really get into the groove, but usually I try to record without one. Just for the sake of completion, what you see here is not even the full script for episode 35 of the Extreme Desert series. The video itself is just about 20 minutes long, and this script already spans roughly 4.5 pages. You can imagine that it takes a good amount of time to actually write all of that. However, the recording time also gets cut down a bit because I no longer have to think about what to say. Again though, most of the videos that I make are done without a script or just with a few passages written down. This is mostly used when I don't have a lot of quiet time to record, as reading off of a script is definitely faster. Now, assuming that I don't have a script, I am now starting to record my voiceover, sentence by sentence. To do so, I take a look at the footage, think about which part of it I actually want to keep in the video, and what I want to say. And then I say it, usually 2, 3, 4, maybe 5 times, until it sounds just right. And that process is repeated again and again until I have about 2 minutes filled. Why 2 minutes? Well, I'm not exactly sure, but doing 2 minutes of commentary this way usually takes about 10 to 15 real-time minutes, and I have found that that is a good time to take a short break, drink something, stretch your legs, and then continue. Now, of course, I do not simply record those 2 minutes and put them straight into the video. No matter how good a microphone is, I find that there is always room for improvement with a bit of audio editing, and so I process my audio with a few different filters to get exactly what I want. I could probably do an entirely separate video about the actual settings that I use here, so I'll spare you the finer details. In essence, I apply background noise removal, a slight compressor to, well, essentially reduce the range of the audio, so that the loud peaks and the most silent parts are a bit closer together, and some normalization, so that the audio doesn't become distorted by being too loud. Back when I recorded with my old Samson Meteor microphone, I also applied some minor equalization to boost or reduce certain frequency ranges, but with the new SM7B that is no longer necessary. Just to give you a quick comparison, this here is the raw, unedited audio straight from the microphone. Hey there, and welcome back to RimWorld. My name is Pete, and today we complete episode 37 of our RimWorld Extreme Desert Challenge. And this is the same audio after it has been processed. Hey there, and welcome back to RimWorld. My name is Pete, and today we complete episode 37 of our RimWorld Extreme Desert Challenge. If there are any audio engineers among you, you will probably notice at least a dozen things that can be improved here, but it has worked well for me so far, and the audio is actually one of the things that I very frequently receive lots of lovely comments for, so at the moment I don't really feel like tweaking any of these settings all too much. Now, doing a full voiceover session for a 20-minute RimWorld video takes about 2 hours or so. Again, I am very meticulous and often record one and the same sentence multiple times, but eventually we have all of our audio and can put together the final video. And this process is really straightforward. I just drop the audio in the commentary track and trim the raw gameplay footage down to only those scenes that I want and that I previously selected. No fancy editing here, just simple cuts, but oftentimes quite a lot of them. For a game like Mutant Year Zero or Mass Effect, where the gameplay itself is mostly unedited, this is a quicker process in which I only edit out things like loading screens, for example. But for RimWorld or XCOM, where the gameplay is presented in a much more condensed way that focuses mainly on the highlights, this can of course take a little longer. Using RimWorld as our example, another hour or so is spent on this, but ultimately we then end up with about 20 minutes of gameplay that has an intro and all of my commentary, and so we're now almost ready to render. I say almost because there is at least one thing still missing, and that would be the outro. As you know, I show the list of all executive producer patrons at the end of every single video, and since that list is subject to rather frequent changes, I usually have to download the most up-to-date list from Patreon and cannot simply copy and paste the outro from the last episode. That list is then pasted into a PowerPoint template. Yes, I am a little ashamed to admit it, but hey, it works for me, so I never found the need to learn Photoshop, GIMP or a similar program. Export that as a PNG, add it to the video, add a small transition effect, cut it to the right length, and there we go, our outro is done. At this point, we are in fact ready to export the file, and once again that is done using the same lossless codec that was also used for recording the gameplay footage. This has two advantages. First, since input and output files have the same specifications, most of the footage doesn't actually need to be altered or compressed by Vegas, which drastically cuts down on rendering times. Second, this ensures that the final video has the highest possible quality, and that is important for the last step in the process, converting the video in Handbrake. If I wanted to upload the file straight from Vegas, I would routinely be looking at a 200 to 300 gigabyte upload, and you can imagine why that is the opposite of practical. So we have to get that file size way down, and that is where Handbrake comes into play. Handbrake is a video converter and transcoder, and I use it to drastically decrease the video's file size while preserving as much of the original quality as possible. That is also why having great quality to begin with is crucial. In my experience, the better the original file looks, the better the converted file looks as well. Apart from the settings that affect the video quality, I mostly follow YouTube's guidelines for video content, so I output the video as an MP4 with the audio and video codecs recommended by YouTube. Again, I feel like the more work I put in to make the video be easily usable, and very importantly that includes decreasing the bitrate and with that the file size as well, the lower the chance of YouTube's compression messing things up. So yes, I am going through a lot of trouble here, but it is all done to ensure that your viewing experience does not differ too much from my gaming experience. Now, converting a regular 20-minute RimWorld episode takes about 30 to 45 minutes, which is also due to the fact that RimWorld is not really a graphically demanding game. Other games tend to take longer. Mutant Year Zero is one such example, even though that game is also not visually stunning, so there is room to go much higher with these times. Eventually though, we finally have the file that goes up to YouTube, and after watching it back at least once and hopefully finding no mistakes, the original raw footage is deleted, as that takes up several hundred gigabytes worth of disk space. The rest of the process is now actually quite simple. All that we need is a video title, a description, some tags and a thumbnail. For the first three, I use a simple Word template, and having a backup of your description as a text file can be important. You generally do not want to rely on YouTube to save everything, and a proper text editor is also much more pleasant to work with anyway. For the thumbnail, I then once again make that shameful click over to PowerPoint, where I have another template ready to go. All that is needed is to adjust the episode number, and we're good to go. I was never one to clickbait with my video thumbnails, and so standing out with that lovely green color is enough for me. For games like Mutant Year Zero, XCOM or Mass Effect, I use screenshots from the recording session to put into the thumbnails, often stuff from cutscenes, as that usually looks better than regular gameplay footage, but this is really not an all too complicated process that we need to dive deeper into. All that is left to do at this point is to tell YouTube that the video can and should be monetized, add the outro, info cards, and there we go, we are finally ready to publish. All in all, from starting up RimWorld for the initial recording session up until the point where I click publish, at least a good 8 to 10 hours of work have gone by, not including the rendering and compression times. But ultimately, another video goes up for you to enjoy and for me to be proud of, and at the end of the day, that is what counts. So yeah, that is how I make a video. Of course, I have mentioned it here and there, the process is slightly different for other games, but I would say most of it is pretty similar, so after watching this, you now know how I approach basically everything that I have ever uploaded on this channel. I hope that you found this short look behind the scenes somewhat informative, maybe it even inspired you to make your own videos. In any case, if you have any follow-up questions, then feel free to leave them down below. I decided not to include the hardware side of things, as I feel like that doesn't really matter too much for the actual workflow, and I have actually changed every single piece of hardware in my setup at least once since starting this channel, and the overall recording process is still largely the same. Nonetheless, if you want to know more about the hardware that I use, let me know. Above all though, I hope you enjoyed the video. Let me also take a moment here to say thank you to everyone who has been with me for the last 5 years. Whether you joined all the way back in 2016 or just yesterday, I am so incredibly grateful for your support, and I hope that the next 5 years will be just as fun as the last 5. If you feel the same and maybe also like this video, then I would of course be very happy if you could leave a thumbs up, and if you want to support me and my channel further, then you can of course do so as well, for example by subscribing to stay up to date, by grabbing some merch over on shop.petecomplete.com, or by checking out and maybe even pledging to the Pete Complete Patreon. Thank you all so much for being an absolutely amazing community for the last 5 years, and of course, as always, thank you all for watching, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.